Well, hello and welcome to October 2020. We were contacted by Felipe Martins of Portugal, and he is working on his dissertation and his master's in architecture, I believe. And he had some questions for us that he wanted me to answer, and I thought it would be nice to just, hey, why don't we turn this into a video? And he said, right on, dude, that sounds great, in Portuguese. So, without further ado, we'll just dive into it and see what he's got. I haven't really read these questions, so should be interesting. I've read a couple of them, like bits of them, and they seemed pretty in-depth, like they might cause some thoughts. So, that'd be fun. All right, question number 1. What sparked your interest in architecture photography as a profession and career? Well, I got my master's in architecture and practiced for 3 years, and I did not enjoy, personally, having to interact with, depend on, and stay on task for as many people, as long, and such stressful situations that all entailed. Architecture is an extremely difficult profession to make money in and do. I have a lot of respect for what architects do and what they can create because it takes so much time, so much awareness of how people live, what they want, the personalities involved in, getting people to release tons of money to create something that you envision, and it's a lot. And I just had a hard time going to the same place every day to work and staying on the same project for such an extended amount of time. So I still really enjoyed the design process. I enjoyed working creatively, but I wanted to be my own boss, but I didn't want to have to involve myself with so many people on so many levels to get something creative done. And I enjoyed photography, but I did not enjoy working in film. I know there's a lot of artsy people out there that might offend, but it just wasn't my thing. I enjoyed more of the technical aspect of digital photography. And I had learned Photoshop in architecture school. And those kind of came together when digital photography got to a place where it was as good as 35, at least. And so those just kind of serendipitously came together when I decided to leave the profession. I was actually just going to buy foreclosures, develop them, flip them, do something like that. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you go into architectural photography? You already have an in with architects and you enjoy photography. And here I am. Thank you, Chet Williams. So that's what sparked my interest in architectural photography. And I do have to say that working in light and composition, as you do with photography around architecture, nothing ever came so naturally as that for me. And it just felt like a really good fit. So that's my answer to question number 1. Number 2, do you consider that having, and Felipe Martins, his native language is Portuguese, so some of these questions might be just a tad bit off in English, but I'll try and correct him, if not him, but Do you consider that having the background in education and architecture somehow influences your work as a photographer? 100%. If I had to, that's a yes, absolutely 100%. If I had to recommend to someone who wanted to become a photographer, I would not tell them to go, I would not suggest that they go to photography school. Photography that you learn for the technical aspects of it is a technical thing. I think understanding psychology and your subject matter, because you are conveying these images to humans. So if you can understand psychology, if you can understand design, if you're going to be a portrait photographer, understanding psychology and body language, and I would suggest people study primarily the subject matter that they're interested in photographing or being a videographer around, or And that's why my background in architecture helped me succeed and influenced in how I see architecture, I believe. So, yes, having a background in architecture is invaluable to my success. One thing, I think, success being the ability to make a living off of it. Question number 3. Do you consider architecture photography in our present technological and social context as an important step in energizing the architecture discipline? Yeah. I mean, our whole capitalist Western society, even as a mix of socialist and capitalism in different countries and everything else, is still, our whole existence is based off of competition to some degree, and, showing what you've been able to do is a means of competing for potential new clients. I think showing what you've done and letting other people see that energizes them. When I see other photographers' work that is great, it energizes me to, get up early and think about what I'm doing, try to improve it. And yes, absolutely, I think it energizes the design field because you can see what other people are doing, what's possible. And the amazing thing in even sports or anything else, to take skateboarding, for example. I was watching something where they were doing just a high ollie contest. No one could get it forever. And then one guy just barely squeaked it out. And as soon as this one guy squeaked it out, it's like everyone else kind of knew it was possible and could do it to a much greater degree. A lot more people got it just right after this one person got it. And I think that's the same in most anything, where as soon as someone shows it's possible, as soon as someone shows that you can do a 5-minute mile or 4-minute mile, whatever it is, everyone else starts realizing and believing that they can do it, and it just kind of has its way of happening. So yeah, I think that capturing and showing what is possible and what can be done energizes the future designs to come. So yeah. In the discussion process with your clients, which requisites are generally made? So in speaking with my clients, what requisites are made? I'm reading that as requirements. I'm not an English major, but I believe that's what that word means. That's kind of humiliating. But when I was younger in my career, there was more requisites coming from the client. And as I've gotten, into my career more so, it's more that they look to me to say what's going to make this shoot the best possible. But if I'm thinking like the common requirements of any shoot, is that for one, you capture, if it's a residence, you capture the major spaces that help convey it to a viewing public through a magazine or online resource or anything else. So you're going to want to have your general shot list that includes the best exteriors, entry, dining, living, bedroom, master bath, all of these things that are the majority spaces, the common spaces of any residence. And then obviously details and anything that's special about it makes it stand out. Usually people are coming to a photographer to get some of whatever that X factor is that specific person incorporates into their process of creating images of their creative work. And the thing I always try and remind myself is that I'm overlaying my creativity over top of an architect's creativity, and I don't want my creativity to take the attention away from the architecture. And that's a really a really fine balance between screaming photo tricks and incredible architecture. So there's a balance there. But yeah, the requirements are, let us know what the budget's going to be. Here's our rough shot list, but we'd like you to look at what you think the shot list would be, and the date, the location. It's pretty. It seems pretty simple to me when I think about it now, but it's at this point usually laid more so on me. Following this thought, in which way do you define your process of analysis of the architecture work? Do you consider this more personal in the sense of exploring and studying said work by yourself, or do you follow your client's recommendations? Again, earlier in a career, you'll have a client who will far more tell you exactly what they want. And later in a career, or midway in a career, peak of your career, whatever, people will ask you, what do you see here? I've gotten to where I can walk through a commercial space or residence and know that's going to make a pretty good composition there. It's kind of like just a key locks in at some point, and you just kind of see the composition come together, and then I think, all right, what's the lighting that's going to accentuate all of that? If I don't generally scout a project ahead of time unless the budget is really padded, and they really want that. It can be on a very exacting shoot. It is invaluable to do that. But with residences and most commercial spaces, I've found that I've done this enough to where I can arrive on site and spend a half an hour to an hour and see exactly what needs to be captured, and pretty much know immediately how we need to capture that and when we need to capture it according to light and everything else. I find it helpful to walk the site with the client because they're going to know what they're interested in and what was very difficult to make this beautiful moment or detail or whatever out of, which is a good requirement for them, or a good requirement coming from them, that we want to cover this because it is something that was difficult and valuable for us to portray to potential clients. So there's that. Let's see. Do you consider more? So yeah, there's a combination of the personal exploration of a space and then also what the clients bring to it. But it's kind of like asking a fish about water when a client's trying to know what they want to shoot. It's usually more so that they'll give you a rough idea and then you'll kind of refine it into what is great, basically. Alrighty, next question. Which are some of the characteristics, parameters you consider to be the most important for a photography or even a set of photographies of its success? So what are some of the most important characteristics and parameters do you consider to be important for, let's say, a good set of photographs of a work of architecture? For one, the design has to be, if you're solely focusing on communicating the design, the design's got to be good. I could make great photographs of junky architecture, but you'd really have to play a lot of photo tricks. That's a lot of times why really high-minded design clients will shy away from like dusk shots, because it's a low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's just always going to be pretty warm and interesting and inviting when you shoot something, around dusk. And I do it all the time, and I've had clients say, oh, let's just avoid the dust shot, but then you get it and they're like, I can't resist that. It's an interesting kind of conflict there. But the characteristics parameters, most important. Good design. I think a client that recognizes what you bring to the table and that they value it, and allow you to do what you do rather than trying to control you into what they think needs to be done specifically. If there's too much control coming from the client's side, you're going to negate the X factor of the individual that you bring in to photograph your work. So I work with clients that are very exacting and know exactly what they want. And I do believe that in those situations, the photography speaks more to their photographic vision for their design rather than the full experience of what I would bring to the table. Not to say that they don't make great photographs, and sometimes they see something that I don't and make a better photograph. It happens, it does. But the best photography that I've done that I'm like most proud of usually comes from a situation where I'm working with someone who respects what you do and encourages you and says, here's what we've done and we're so happy to be working with you. It's a dynamic that brings out the best. So I think good design and then an interpersonal relationship communication that allows you to really confidently go forward and do what you do. I think those are the two primary things. And then after that, having an assistant that is working hard, knowing what's going on, knowing what you need, knowing what to take care of, having a stylist that's really good, knowing, the process of how the day goes and working efficiently, having all the people involved be very positive-minded people. I don't if you've ever worked in a situation where someone's really negative, whatever, it just kills everything that's going on, especially when you're working creatively. I think you're pulling from very deep emotions and experiences, and to be in an environment where it's emotionally charged in a way that prevents you from accessing that flow that creates what you typically create, it limits the cohesion of all the parts coming together in the best way possible. Is the best way I can describe it. Next question. What is your position relative to the use of artificial lighting beyond the existent in the design of the building? As, for example, flashes, strobes, among others. Do you privilege the use of solely natural light in your work? ? If not, do you think it somehow misrepresents the space, or do you see it just as a simple enhancement in order to show as much as possible of said space? Right. So I've seen tutorials that people will do where they are, say, doing an exterior of a home. And they'll have the full frame, and they'll bring into frame like a light and hit a part of the building. But then in post-production, they pull the light out and take it out. And then they just do that over and over and over, and they make this huge photo trick, And to me, personally, my aesthetic, I don't think it works, because I kind of think that you see that light coming from that direction, and subconsciously you think there should be a light source right here, but there isn't. And it just looks tricky. Now, that being said, I pull lights into all kinds of places on our shoots, but my intent in doing so all the time when we do this is to mimic the natural light, or if you're having the light hitting maybe the exterior of a building in some way, that it be kind of a rim light or out of frame, but never something that you would just pull in, have as a light source, and then just completely remove. I'm sure I've done it, but as a principle, I try and steer away from that because of what I previously described. I just think your mind might not be able to articulate exactly why it feels weird, but I think it reads it. And to have that kind of trickery going on doesn't appeal to the aesthetic that I want to create. And in all the added lighting that I do, I'm generally trying to accentuate the natural light. So on an interior where we're, say, shooting towards a large window where there is, essentially I treat natural light as a key light source, the main light source, and then try, if I'm adding light where I want to have it come in and backfill just a little bit to still keep that direction of light that's primary, I'll try and add the light in as close of a direction as it naturally is. So sometimes we'll pull in a strobe, but we'll hit the ceiling right above where the window is, and that helps accentuate that light, but have it come further into the space and push back into the shadows just a little bit, but it does it in a more natural way than if we just put a light over here and hit the shadows. So you can definitely manipulate a space. I think it feels more natural, as natural light as you can go. And in most instances, as of recent, unless we're shooting towards an open window for some reason, we'll generally go with mostly natural light. So that's, mostly where we're at. What is your opinion about photography as solely an operative instrument to record memories, and the reel as a support to preservation of architecture, or even as a support in the development of a new project versus a tool to transmit a concept and message used as a medium of propagation and commercialization? I'm going to have to read that one again. What is your opinion about photography as solely an operative instrument to record memories, and the reel as a support to preservation of architecture? So I'll end that question there. What is your opinion about photography as an operative instrument to record memories? So first of all, the way our memory works is, just the way our vision works is so unlike how a camera works in some subtle ways. But, if I'm focusing on the camera that's recording me right now and I look at the Canon, logo, like everything else almost is blurry except for that. Like not even stuff in the same plane. It's just like in a camera, you'll have a plane of focus, and so everything in that plane's in focus, but it's like you have a massive circular vignette into a very small patch on the back of your eye that actually records detail. And so to think that we should somehow only use a camera to be accurate to our memory would more so mean that we're doing images that just have a very tiny part of the image that's actually in focus, and the rest is very peripheral and, not really in focus and not a lot of information there. So there's a conflict there as far as just a operative to record memories. There's a disconnect there, in my opinion. As a support for the preservation of architecture, I don't know exactly what that means, but I would assume that photography supports the preservation of architecture in maybe conveying to people who can't physically go to a place to see what good architecture is or looks like, or inspire people to do more architecture similar to that, or convert their architecture design or whatever in some way according to what they're seeing. And I would think that would reflect back upon maybe like people seeing that architecture in their community or similar architecture and preserving that and building more like it, or I think I'm kind of grasping at straws here for understanding exactly what that question is getting at. So the second part of it, or even as a support in the development of a new project. I think that's huge. I mean, people bring in precedent images all the time when they're working with an architect to show here's stuff that we've loved seeing, and we'd like aspects of this in our design. So to support the development of a new project, it's huge. Video as well is huge in that. Versus a tool to transmit a concept and a message used as a medium of propagation and commercialization. I still kind of a hard time understanding that, but I don't know. You're just not going to untangle those things. Our best, as humans, our best swings at, untangling commercialization, capitalism from our natural processes of creating and surviving and everything else have come at the cost of just untold millions of lives. I'm not saying I'm a right-wing conservative capitalist, but there's a socialism and communism works ideologically, but not in practice kind of thing. Now, the Scandinavian socialism is a different thing, and blah, blah, blah. Sure. But I don't think that, the representation of what you can do is, in service to getting more work. You have to use that, and the whole thing is a cycle that feeds. And I don't know that we should try to separate those things, but if you think of it, and this is going way too deep probably, but if you think of it in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, the basic layers are, basically security, safety, physical, and then the higher needs are like basically respect, love, and self-actualization. These images both serve the lower portion of that pyramid, providing for yourself, providing for the architect, providing for the photographer, and advertising those services to be able to do it again, to stay part of the economy and keep going. And the images, pull from or contribute to the top part of that pyramid as far as the ideology of what you can do with a space, how it affects your life beyond just keeping the cold out or the heat out or the rain out and you safe. And there's the basic needs that are met from design, and then the higher needs that are met, and the photography in that serves the basic needs of the people involved as far as an economic service. And then as you get into the higher part of that pyramid, the consideration there is that you're portraying an idea of what's possible, and kind of encouraging the whole thing to move forward. So if you're showing green design or some kind of social movement within that design, there you're serving higher parts of that pyramid of needs. So that's a pretty deep one and going in some weird places, but hey, why not, right? We got time. It's a pandemic. Anyways, in this sense, what do you try and showcase in your work? Do you consider the existence of your own style of photography important? I consider my own style of photography very important to me, my clients, and my family, for those, basic needs. My style of photography beyond the immediate people that interact with it, it would be nice to think that there's some kind of X factor that I put into my images that speak to people in some way, that, essentially I've looked into the chaos and organized something and brought it back into the articulated knowledge of this world and been able to inspire something more and glean just a little bit more truth out of the chaos for us. That would be nice to think that, but I think it's a judgment like that is only really made over longer spans of time. So I don't know if I don't know if I consider the existence of my own style of photography important on that level. But I think the creative process and working creatively is extremely important and most useful to our societies when done with the consideration of the true meaning of what's really going on below the surface with all of this, existence that we experience. And I think when you get people working creatively who are really digging below the surface in those ways as well, you start to be able to make connections and bring further truth to our articulated knowledge, which is, I think, the biggest contribution in many ways that we can bring to this life. So there's that. When you photograph a building, who do you see as a final consumer of your work? The final consumer would be potentially the person looking to, I guess there's multiple. I mean, it would be the person considering using that specific architect would be one, a future, client for that architect. My immediate client is a consumer of my work as something that they need to then use to attract potential clients. I know when I was in architecture school, Brian Vandenbrink, a lot of his work really influenced me, and he's actually a photographer here in Maine, and I went to school in Michigan, and I was seeing his work all the time, and I really connected with it. It was a big influence on me and my design aesthetic and everything that I gravitated towards. But, design students, people looking to design their home, people looking to just decorate their own homes, make their own spaces beautiful, create even their own spaces that give them calm and peace and allow for them to, benefit from that appropriate form of comfort around their family or socializing or even public spaces and everything else. It's kind of an endless line, really, of end consumers of architectural photography. So, infinity. Next question. So, in follow-up to that, when you photograph a building, who do you see as a final consumer of your work? Infinite, really. The architect who hired you, yes. Or the possible clients who might be attracted to hire the author of said building, yes. And basically everyone else for a variety of different needs. So, what is your position about digital manipulation of photographs in the post-processing? There's a guy over there who post-processes all our images nonstop. He's very bashful, doesn't want to come on camera, but he's extremely talented, and he's so good that most of the time you don't notice what he does until you see a photograph before he got a hold of it. So everything that I can do on site as far as my whimsy of composition and lighting, I capture just multiple images to get the data. So I call it data collection when I'm on a photo shoot. And then we bring it back to the magician, Tim, who kind of takes this and puts it together. And at that point, I kind of work as a director in the background who kind of weighs in occasionally. But the post-production process in service of what I'm looking for strives towards accentuating what is naturally there that you would see with your eye. I mean, we do a lot of elimination of like exit signs and everything else. If you want 100% accurate representation that you will remember in the same way that you would see a photograph, go to the space, and afterwards you won't remember the sprinkler heads and the exit signs and all that. You'll remember the feeling of the space. And essentially, we're creating images that are the best capsule of what you would remember from visiting the space. So I am not some photorealistic extremist that would say you have to just take one shot and leave it. If you want to do that, that's fine. That's your own deal. Cool. But as well, what I'm doing here is not strictly my artistic vision. I have a lot of opinions and artistic input on creation of these commercial architectural images, but it's in service to someone else who's already made a space, designed a space, and they need those images to convey the idea and the experience of that space to potential clients. So in my abstract work that I do, there's really very little manipulation other than pushing and pulling, like vibrance and saturation and stuff like that. It's more an artistic expression, searching for truth in that manner, in a way. But yeah, I am pro photo manipulation, but not beyond, not grossly beyond what you would experience in visiting the space from what you would remember. So that's a complex answer. Let's see. What is your last question? Over time, quite different opinions have emerged relative to the role of architecture photography and the possibility that it might not establish an accurate representation of the architectural work. You could make that point, but again, if you ask someone to go visit a space and then show them a photograph afterwards, I'll bet you they gel. And if they don't gel, I would say that the architectural photographer has done too much photo trickery. They put too much of their own voice into the creation of that photograph, in my opinion. Over time, quite different opinions have emerged relative to the role of architectural photography and the possibility that it might not establish an accurate representation of the architectural work. Yeah, and so if you're comparing that to like photo retouched models, it's a similar thing. You're going for the idea of the best representation of what you would remember. So I could see how people would make that point and be a little sketchy on it. So something to think about. Do you see architectural photography as a medium to experience architecture, taking into account that doing so physically is not available to everyone? Yes, I absolutely do. It is the ability, especially in residential architecture, it is the ability to take people into spaces that are private, that they can see, experience, feel through that 2D, essentially, representation, and inspire them in different ways. What they're doing maybe with their own space or what they want to design, or, and yes, I do see it that way. Do you see architecture photography as a medium to experience architecture? Yes, taking into account that doing so physically is not available to everyone. Public spaces, obviously, you can go and do that, but again, residential and even a lot of the commercial spaces, you're not able to do that. So it's a requirement that you either get still photographs or video of those spaces. Video obviously is a lot more on-site work and difficulty and lighting and control of the space. There's less you can do in post and everything else, and you're taking everything in every movement, really. Where a photograph, you can be very selective about what you're showing. So you can more selectively represent a space for the best parts through photography, where videography, you can't hide as much or avoid as much because by nature you're just showing more and moving. So it is implied that this not intend to be a way of replacing the physical sensation of it. It is implied that this is not, yeah. So I would agree that if possible, like I really want to go visit the Getty Museum. I believe it's Getty. Well, anyways, the Frank Gehry in Bilbao, I believe it is. I mean, I'd love to go visit that space. I don't know if I'll ever make it to Bilbao, but at a minimum, I've been able to see photographs of the space, right? So it's kind of like at a minimum, we've been able to provide this experience. Like I was able to go and visit the Exeter Library by Louis Kahn, I believe, and that was just amazing. And that's one of those spaces that photography, you can show it, but the immensity of actually the immense emotional experience of going through that space is far beyond most any representation I was able to get of it or I'd ever seen of it. And funny, on the exterior, it's not much to look at, but you go inside and it's a crazy experience. That and the Pantheon in Rome, to me. And oddly, they both have very prominent circular aspects to their design that's interesting. Hadn't thought about that before. But yeah, I don't think it necessarily should replace visiting a location or a design, but you just can't go visit a lot of these places. So this is where access from, someone like myself as a photographer get to go to, experience, translate that into imagery, and share with you. So that was fun. That was a lot of talking. Hope I didn't bore you to death. Hope you're surviving this pandemic well. I hope you're keeping your chin up, and hopefully this election and all that will be over soon, and we'll be back to life as pseudo-normal. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Yay. Anyways, hope you're having a great fall. If you have any questions, thoughts, answers, or further insight, let us know. Thanks a lot for watching.